good afternoon. Welcome to the Knowledge and Learning Commons. My name is Natalie. I work here at the UN Library and Archives in Geneva for the Commons. And actually today is our first hybrid event. After 2 years of being completely online and learning through the pandemic, we now have an audience with us in the room, and actually the large majority of you joining online from either UN Geneva or outside UN Geneva. So a really big thank you and welcome to you all for being here at the Commons. If you're new to the Knowledge and Learning Commons, this is our space for informal learning and knowledge sharing on issues of both multilateralism and professional development. Our aim is really to be here for UN staff, diplomats, and interns to talk about and discuss the knowledge and the issues we need to be able to improve how we work at the UN. Today, we are talking about Agile. Before we get there, we have just a few housekeeping notes to mention to you, especially to those who are joining us via WebEx. To help with your accessibility and to navigate the platform, we've prepared a short video for you, so let's take a look at the video now.
Welcome to a Knowledge and Learning Commons online event. Here are a few accessibilities features available on WebEx webinar to ensure you have the best experience with us today. At the bottom of your screen there is a menu bar with various settings. Click on the Robotic CC, WebEx Assistance, icon to enable closed captioning, and this open a tab on the right-hand side of your screen. This will allow you to get written transcription with full meeting, complete with clearly labeled speakers. Or you can select the second option in the menu bar, closed captioning, which will appear at the bottom of your screen, allowing you to easily follow along in the meeting with real-time captioning. WebEx allows you to receive live translation to multiple languages by clicking on the bottom arrow. If you would like to interact with us live, then raise your hand by navigating to the menu bar at the bottom of your screen and selecting the seventh option from the left side of the menu. Customize your own view to watch the event in your preference through selecting Layout at the top right side of your screen and customizing your video layouts to best suit your needs. For any further assistance or questions throughout the event, then chat with us directly by selecting the chat icon, second option from the right side of the menu bar. Keep an eye out on the chat for announcements from our team. WebEx is compatible with all screen readers and default keyboard shortcuts. Our team behind the scenes are here to answer you directly. Enjoy the event.
For those joining online, as mentioned, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to put that in the chat on WebEx. For those joining in the room, you can simply raise your hand. One of our team members will come and hopefully assist you. So hopefully that's enough to get us started today. Our topic, as mentioned, is Agile in action. Many of you perhaps have heard of Agile methodology before, or perhaps not, and that's why we're here today. It's definitely something that our own team has considered over the past 2 years through the pandemic, but also just in general, as we look at new ways of working and also towards the future of work. So if this is a completely new methodology for you, welcome. We're here to actually discuss this today, and we have a full suite of speakers who are experts and practitioners in Agile here to answer some questions for us. Here on the screen, you'll now see our learning objectives for today's session. We're going to understand what Agile methodology is and what it means in the modern workplace. We'll also look at what this actually entails for different sectors, especially us here at UN Geneva, but we also have speakers from academia and the private sector to really be able to learn from each other and what this means in different contexts. And finally, hopefully we'll also take away some practical tools and ideas for how you can actually get started in your own teams, and also a full suite of speakers here who are here to answer your questions, if you have any, on how to get started. It's a pleasure to introduce our speakers in the room with you now. Joining us from UN Geneva, we have Daniela Wuerz. She is the Senior Coordination Officer and Change Manager at New Work, UN Geneva. Joining us online is Malta Ionesova. She's an HR specialist at UN Geneva. Joining us from academia, we have with us Katherine Tatarinov. She's not only a researcher at the University of Geneva, but the Managing Director of the Geneva Innovation Movement. And also we have Tina Ambos, who's the Professor of International Management, also at the University of Geneva. Finally, we have Susanna Nagel. She's the Head of Quality Control at F. Hoffman La Roche. And we also have her colleagues here who've contributed to the content today here in the room. A huge thanks for traveling all the way to Geneva for this session today. Moderating the event is Thomas Neufing, the Chief of the Center for Learning and Multilingualism. So a big thanks to all of our speakers for their time today in preparing all this content. And also, again, a big thanks to you for joining us in the room. We do want to hear from you throughout the session. We are using Mentimeter, especially if you're online, but also in the room itself. You can either scan the QR code using your phone that you see on the screen, or you can simply go to menti.com. there's a code to join, and that's 99393276. We'll announce that code. Thomas will announce that code a few more times during the session. So if you don't know it, please let us know, raise your hand, and we'll be able to give that code to you. It would be great to have your questions and for you to vote for the ones you'd like answered. We're also using Menti to ask you some questions, and we'd love your advice and your insights. Perhaps you've got some ideas, perhaps you've got some doubts. So please let us know using Mentimeter. We'll be using it throughout the session, so this is one instance where we're actually asking you to pull out your phones. Menti.com, the code is 99393276. We're going to begin with a warm-up to get us started, and the question is, how well acquainted are you with Agile methodology? So we'll give you a moment to sign in, let us know your thoughts. Perhaps you're a novice, perhaps you're a boss. Let us know so we have a feel for the room and those online. While you're logging in, I'll pass over to our moderator, Thomas, to get us started. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Also from my side, I'm privileged, but also it's an extreme joy to moderate this session today about Agile in action. We want to also demystify the term Agile a bit today, but also we have a very powerful panel here, as Natalie already introduced to you, covering different sectors, the UN, academia, and also private sector. So there will be a rich and diverse contribution to the topic. While we're waiting for your level of acquaintance with the Agile methodology, maybe to get us started, I would like to hear from the panelists. When was it actually the first time that you came across the term or the methodology, Agile?
Thanks, Thomas. That's a really fantastic question. I think it was about 2018 when we started the culture change program, New Work, and I was looking at new ways of working together that empower people and team, and it was also in discussions with the Young UN Network.
Thank you, Thomas. I first heard about Agile when I was a young IT consultant in Barcelona around 2009. As a way to run IT projects that was counter to the traditional waterfall methodology.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thanks for the invitation for being here. Agile obviously started as a methodology for software development, and at the time, about more than 10 years ago, was not clear whether it would actually enter management science. It would just be fad and fashion, as we see so many in management. But today, I think it's so important to speak about it because it really became a process of transformation, and I think this is why we're all here today, to hear about it.
Yeah, and for me, it must have been around the time with Daniela, so a little later, 2017, is when in Roche I became a change coordinator for our, at that time called Blueprint Transformation, that we really used to go away from siloed thinking at the different sites in the network, but to network thinking. I think since then it's largely evolved, so many things have changed, many learnings, and I'm happy to share some of these in the session later.
Thank you. Actually, my first encounter with the term Agile was when I was a young football player and my coach was shouting at me, Thomas, you have to become much more agile. So the connotation for me has been a bit negative in the beginning, but now this is a different context. I look now on the screen, we have, what is that? 12, somewhat familiar, 20, not bad, 13, very familiar, 3, and a boss level, 1. Is that person here in the room, or was it connected from the outside? Who is the boss level? We'll find out later. Thank you so much for this taking the pulse, and I'm sure that if there are any knowledge gaps, they will also be addressed in these sessions. And without further ado, I would like to ask Daniela to share with us your experience with introducing Agile at UN Geneva. Over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Thomas. I have to say I'm really excited about this event and being here today, not only because Agile is really at the heart of what I believe we need to do in the UN, but also because this marks the first time that we can come together in a hybrid event since the start of the pandemic. It's been 2 difficult, challenging years, and it's just nice, you know, to move to the next normal. Before we actually talk about, Agile, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the New Work Culture Change Program, because we are the co-host here, but also this is how we are implementing Agile in the UN through the New Work Network. So just a little bit about what is that? What is New Work? You might have heard it already. If not, I'll just explain it. So New Work started in 2018 in Geneva. It is a staff initiative that's very important. It's not a top-down, it's a bottom-up, staff-led, staff-driven initiative. So it started in Geneva, but in the meantime, it has gone global. So we have hubs in Geneva, in Bangkok, in New York, and we are establishing one in the field as well. And you know, we always come together, and what we do is we co-create a vision for the culture that we want to see in the UN, so that we have a more fulfilling workplace where we can all contribute more fully. So we have this vision, but of course we also have an action plan. We have many activities under New Work that help us achieve that vision. But what's really nice about this, it's an ever-growing network of staff. We constantly have people joining. And that New Work, in essence, is those 5 themes you see on the graphic. So we do care a lot about innovation. So we say innovation and risk-taking. And here we're not talking about, oh, some team on the side is doing innovation in an innovation team. No, no, no. We're talking about mainstreaming innovation. We want to empower everybody that works, you know, at the UN to feel like they can innovate in their daily work. So we're looking at ways to introduce, for example, innovation time, and to push the innovative thinking agenda as a mainstream. Then we have Fit for the Future. And this is what we're doing today is an example of that. What we're doing there is identify the soft skills that are very important and ever more important as we go forward. And we want to give our staff the opportunities to learn as they go along. And then we have the area that's called working flexibly. And this has helped us tremendously dealing with the pandemic, because here we started in 2018 in Geneva to promote flexible working arrangements. We were all convinced that we all want and need more flexibility. So we were teaching, you know, staff and managers how to work effectively remotely, and then the pandemic came and we almost switched seamlessly, because many people, you know, we had briefed many people about this. Then we have collaborative environment, and of course it's all about teams working collaboratively together, but also across silos. So we want to do silo breaking. Here's where we look at things like, can we implement a cross-assignment scheme? Can sections learn from each other? But here's also where, as part of this whole next normal discussion that's going on right now, we recently organized global dialogues under New Work with staff from peacekeeping missions from everywhere. We got 180 staff together to decide what is it that we want to see in the next normal? Not just because New York decided, they came up with recommendations. We said, okay, let's ask the staff members. What do we think about this? What do we want? So this is all also in the collaborative environment. But today's event falls in the area of empowered networks, because here what we want to achieve is really empower staff to contribute more fully, and we do this mainly through promoting the Agile methodology that we very much believe in. It's about having flatter hierarchies, really freeing the staff so they can take decisions, so more distributed decision making, and really that we all can contribute to projects as we think that best in line with our skills. So this is all very exciting. And why is it so important today that we're becoming agile? By the way, the COVID pandemic has shown again how Agile can work. Companies that had already introduced Agile were much more able to deal, you know, with the challenges posed by the COVID pandemic than those that haven't. And so for us, it's given us new momentum to say now is the time in the next normal where we can see, we can more easily say Agile is important, Agile methodology, because we've just proven that flexibility, for example, is key. And the way, by the way, we did the COVID response here in Geneva was very much Agile. Everybody in the team had the same voice, the same decision making. We were just all working together. What crisis shows you usually is that a level doesn't matter, but the function matters. Whoever has a function, they're at the table. So the pandemic has also given us this new view. But why is it also important? It's because our world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. So for us at the UN, we want to keep pace with that. And in order to be more able to do that, we believe that adopting an agile mindset and methodology will help us. And there's another aspect here. Those of you who are familiar with the Young UN, they've done surveys about the culture in the UN, and those surveys show that there's issues for younger generations when they see the workplace culture. They don't feel like it's one that fits their needs, they don't really like it. So we, as New Work, that's why we created the vision. We really want to make sure that we have a culture that's attractive to the younger generations. It's important that, you know, younger generations, they come, they're interested, and they stay. So that's also why we are focusing on Agile. And then, of course, everybody's now demanding, rightly so, more flexibility and freedom to determine the way they work. And that's, again, been accelerated through COVID, because COVID has led to more transparency, more people at the table in meetings because it was all online, and more flexibility. So nobody wants to go back to the way things were before. No, we all ready to transition to the next normal, and it will be with more flexibility and freedom. And then the last point in the UN is always, we all know, our mandates are increasing, at the same time our budgets are shrinking. So again, it's time to try out Agile methodology and see how this can help with this point as well. Just a little bit, what is it when you say Agile? Here you see a classic way, top left, you see a hierarchy, how things were. This is very much also what we know in the UN. We all have our organizational chart. We know where we sit in this, between A, B, C, D, and E. So this is the way things were. And now Agile is the way underneath how things are. So it's much more fluid, and it's you don't stay in one reporting line. Based on the project that you work in, you may be reporting into one project, and when that project is finished, you will be reporting into a different project. Now, we're not talking about getting rid of the reporting lines. We will still have our reporting lines, but when we work in projects, we are reporting into the project. And that's also within that frame, we will have more decision making, and we will be given more power within the project. So that's what we want to achieve. But with this, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Malta, who is online and who will continue to lead you through Agile.
Thank you, Daniela. But actually, after what Daniela has showed and explained to us, can we make the organization, the United Nations, agile as some other structures did through a full-fledged agile transformation? Next slide, please, Daniela. At our level, staff without a mandate from the General Assembly, we had to find a way to introduce the idea and to choose how we would make a difference from the bottom, hopefully to the top. So we chose to create a common language and to focus on where we could have an impact. And we decided to focus on teams and make Agile first and foremost a tool for team performance, and to try to move away from a concept that is sometimes not well understood or sometimes even not well perceived when it is imposed from the top. So we tried it ourselves. We conducted a pilot about a year ago, maybe a year and a half, and which was, by the way, evaluated by Tina Ambos and Katherine Tatarinov that we have here in our panel today. And now we are at the stage of where we're scaling it to interested teams. While doing this, we are wondering, does it make sense? Is it realistic? Or even do we even have a choice not to move in that direction? In any case, we're trying, maybe doing some baby steps, but we do it what we can. Now, we would like to play a little game with you to demonstrate how Agile might look in action. So considering we only have a few minutes for this activity, I will ask you to please use your imagination for anything that we cannot demonstrate. So imagine we have a team whose goal is to create a chocolate bar that its customers will love. Because Agile teams are user-centered and client-focused, understanding what they need and want is really important to us. So to do that, we're going to develop many prototypes of our product, and we'll get and integrate our clients' feedback on these prototypes to make sure that they fit our clients' needs. In this game of imagination, you're going to be playing the clients for tasting these prototypes, the chocolate bars that we have created. Our Agile team got together and created a plan on how to reach our goal. So we split our work into 3 main phases that we're going to call them iterations. And each iteration is going to give our team a chance to source feedback from you on the different elements of the chocolate bar. I see our team has already pulled up the Menti. And yeah, let's pretend that... sorry, can you go back to the earlier question, through the first question, please? Yeah, so let's pretend you're tasting these different types of chocolate, and let us know if you prefer the darker one or the lighter one. I will also share my screen. Second. Okay, so I hope everyone can see. I see that our winning option is the one that has 70%. So I'm going to pretend that this is our chocolate bar with 70%. Okay, next question, please. So the next question, let us know if there is any special feature that you prefer, like do you want it sugar-free, dairy-free, all in, maybe without nuts? Okay, all in seems to be winning. Let's give a few more seconds to allow everyone to vote. Okay, so we're going to add milk and sugar and everything is in there. Okay, so let's imagine that we have this prototype. Let's go to the next question, please. On the type of filling that you like, the type of flavor that you like to have in your chocolate. So is it going to be chili, truffle, caramel, or berries? Okay, I think it's is it truffle and caramel? Yeah. Actually, I see it very small. So okay, let's. I think it's that. Can you give me one sec? Okay, so this is basically. This is just a point that I was trying to make. Normally, when we are an Agile team, we'll also get together as a team in between these different iterations and discuss how well we have worked together as a team. And we'll also adjust from one stage to another, from one iteration to another, the way we interact, the way we communicate, the way we plan and deliver whatever we discussed. Don't know if there are any questions or if maybe I pass back the floor to Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Malta, for this interactive game. Before we move on with our middle section, so to speak, the University of Geneva, but also the Geneva Innovation Movement, I also wanted to, and Malta mentioned it, acknowledge your great contribution to evaluating this pilot that we have done here at UN Geneva. And it's not the first time. We also, I think, Tina, you did a comparative study on how the UN organizations introduced innovation and their different approaches. So I think this is also one very productive interaction between public sector organizations and academia, where we benefit a lot from your expertise. So we would like to hear more from you, and I think we start with Katherine. Over to you.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Daniela and Malta, also for sharing and giving us a taste of what it feels like to actually work with Agile methodology. So before we talk about the evaluation, just to quickly introduce what we do, Professor Tina Ambos is the director of the Center for Innovation and Partnerships at the University of Geneva, where we work on fundamental research for innovation, around innovation and cross-sector partnerships, including in the UN context. And built on this research, we launched the Geneva Innovation Movement Association, which is a cross-sector network here in Geneva and now beyond of innovation champions, so individual innovation champions, many of whom, the founding members, are here on the stage today, and we try to amplify their work and really learn from each other in that network. Before we get into the relevance of Agile in today's environment, I'd just like to take you back to 2017. There was a staff survey here at the Secretariat of over 15,000 Secretariat staff, where they looked at the day-to-day operations of the UN and how people experience those day-to-day operations. And it found a major issue. Agility, out of the 14 topics that were tested, agility was ranked lowest, innovation was ranked third lowest. Then this was a major issue, particularly with our research showing that innovation and agility are very important for solving the SDGs. And then knowing now what we know about COVID and what happened after that, we also see it's very important to be adaptable, to be agile, and to be fast when accosted with such tremendous change. Then in 2019, in another staff survey, they saw that staff felt that their skills were not up to date, that their skills were maybe outdated, and that they needed to work beyond their silos. So this is the relevance of why Agile today. In our research on innovation, we saw a major need for culture of trust and transparency when pushing innovation forward. We also saw the need for a strong project owner. Now, coming back to the amazing chocolate activity that we just conducted, we see that not only implementing an Agile pilot in the UN is innovative, so that's the overlap, but also that Agile itself, the methodology, can make you more agile, more flat as a team. You all got to participate in the decisions that were just taken about making that chocolate bar. You also all got to iterate on those. So it wasn't a decision that was taken all 3 steps together. There was iterations in between. And then you got to do this as a group. Your voice was heard, and you felt empowered as a strong project owner on that decision. So that's how we see the link between agility and innovation. Now, to hear your opinion, many of you work in the UN, many of you have a lot of experience already with COVID and what happened recently, perhaps ad hoc implementing some of these ways of working in your organizations, in your teams. So maybe hearing from you, in 3 words, what are the greatest opportunities for Agile in embracing, for the UN in embracing Agile? And as we wait for your comments, I'll just ask Daniela in 3 words as well, since she was one of the innovation champions driving this pilot at the UN, to also in 3 words say how she, at that point in time, thought this Agile pilot could benefit the UN.
I thought, because Agile sometimes sounds like, oh, in the UN we cannot do this. So I thought if we do this pilot, we will show that we will choose very diverse teams working on all kinds of different issues, and they will embrace Agile and they will report benefits, and that's what we did. So we proved that we can implement it in the UN.
Thank you, Daniela. And I'm seeing the word cloud coming in, your own responses as well. So innovation, trust, efficiency, okay, there's a lot of words, reach potential, flexibility, empowerment, excellent. So I think these probably align very closely with what you were trying to achieve as well with this pilot. So it's excellent to see all of these responses coming in from you as well. So I think we can move now back to the slides and continue on the learnings of what we saw coming out of this pilot. So just the scope, so we'll talk about learnings, we'll talk about the opportunities and barriers to further implementation and the potential for scaling Agile in the UN. How did we act as observers here? We got to actually participate in a lot of the trainings for the different teams that were involved in this pilot. We got to watch them from the side and evaluate what was going on without effectively interfering. And then we also conducted post-pilot survey and interviews with many of the participants that were involved. So what did we learn? We saw 3 key learnings. The first is that there's a strong desire for scale. So you see here 2 quotes. And I put these 2 quotes here because they're very reflective of what the general group was feeling. The quote on the left shows that this need for experimenting and learning. And staff really expressed an interest in having a safe space to experiment and learn. And this is what they really enjoyed about the pilot. That pilot gave them that. On the right, you see the other quote on people are the most important asset. So what was really important here is 2 things. The first is teams. People are not speaking as I, myself, me, what am I going to do? People are speaking now, my team. How does my team feel empowered? How can my team work together and elevate our entire group together? So this was very important, this movement from me, myself, to now thinking about the team. And the second is that the well-being. So people through this pilot, through these new working methodologies, started to feel valued, started to feel empowered, one of the words in our word cloud, empowerment, to make these decisions and to be part of that. Coming back very briefly to that, it was particularly important because of the COVID reality and because what was happening during that time as well, to have these people feel valued when they could not interact together all the time in person. The second key learning was adaptable system-wide. Many of the teams who participated in this pilot were cross-functional. Some of them were even distributed geographically. And what we saw was that these tools, these mindsets, were actually adaptable to any function. Anyone from working in HR to working in tech, maybe working in legal, could use these and ended up using these tools after the pilot. And you see here in the survey, 80% of respondents found some change in their team's way of working significantly after the pilot, not just during it. So it's very important that this is, in fact, a scalable methodology. And finally, we tried to find what were the key success factors. What needs to happen for this type of methodology to scale throughout the UN? We found 4 things. First, this initial time investment. So these teams needed to be given the time to learn, to train, and to understand how they can adapt these tools to their own working environment. Then beyond just time, they needed other resources. They needed trainers, they needed tools, they needed technology, they needed to have all of this available to them when they could use it and be able to engage with it. And finally, the last 2 are very closely linked. First, we see this creating safety from the top through mindset. Leading from the top, showing through your own way of how you work as a team leader that experimenting is okay and that people can fail and this will not be detrimental to their careers. And through this, enabling a culture of collective progress. So with this, I changed over to Tina, who'll talk about the barriers.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Katja. So isn't that all great? I mean, in a webinar over lunchtime, we can create chocolate bars, right? We introduce agility to the UN in no time for a pilot. I mean, all sounds wonderful, right? I have the luxury of being academic. I can be very critical about all of this. So the bad news is agility, as great as it is and as great as it sounds, it introduces a lot of tensions to your organization. And intentionally so, right? Because agility per se is breaking up boundaries that we have in organizations. We looked at the organizational chart. Suddenly structures are breaking up and we're all kind of working in flexible teams. The boss is not the boss anymore. Roles are being broken open. So what does that actually do to our organizations? Well, it seems very intuitive, and it's also great fun to actually start an agile pilot in the organization, whatever the organization is. We have to think a little bit more about how we can actually implement and scale this, right? And what actually happens to our organization as we go along. So in the new work project, obviously the angle point was to say, well, we need culture change in the UN, right? So trying to change culture is fantastic, right? And we obviously have fantastic, new ideas and values, and how can we better achieve the missions of the UN? And we're onto a very important cause there. But also the UN is an organization that has very strong values. But the UN is not only the only organization that has strong values. Also private sector organizations like pharmaceutical companies have very, very strong values. So what does agile management or agile approaches now do to these values, right? We obviously don't want to throw them overboard, so we still need to anchor and reinforce these values while at the same time trying to change our culture. So that's going to introduce a lot of tensions to the organization. Looking at the structures and processes, right? If I break open my hierarchy suddenly, right? What effect does that have? What effect does that have on decision-making, on the legitimacy of decision-making, right? Because ultimately, these bureaucratic organizations are also there for a reason, for accountability, for legitimacy, right? So a lot of tensions are being actually introduced when we use agility. Of course, also on the strategic level, because the way we're talking about agility here now, it's not a toolbox of how can we work with more fun and more self-responsibility, but it's really about a transformative process for the organizations. So yes, there's a dark side, but the good news is that anticipating the tensions that agility will induce into your organizations is very important to also actually make sure how we can actually address them. And I think the first thing is to be really aware of how do we move from pilot to scale. Quite honestly, I've seen very few, or no single very large organization that has scaled agility fully. We'll hear from the private sector in a few minutes to really see, how do organizations really implement agility at scale, but fully scaling it to an entire organization is really difficult. And often organizations face bottlenecks and boundaries when they feel, now agility is taking over in the organization. While this is what we all wanted at the very beginning, I think we need to be a lot more conscious of what agility really then will do to our organizations as well, right? Again, my message is here not to kind of be overly negative and so now, well, these people have told you great things about agility and I'm going to now tell you don't do it. The message that I want to give you on your way is to say, be very conscious about the context in which we're introducing agility. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, but we actually have to be very conscious about the specific organizations and the contingencies of these organizations where we want to introduce agility. I want to call on you again with a mentee here. In your opinion, what are the greatest challenges to scaling Agile in the UN? And by the way, as an academic, it's fantastic to use the UN as example because it's the most bureaucratic, the kind of most value-driven organization in the world that we have. And actually doing research in this context is amazing because it shows us if we can make it happen here, we can most probably also make it happen anywhere else in the world. So this is always a great source of learning and a great source of inspiration. So yes, my favorite word is coming up here, bureaucracy, right? Bureaucracy is actually a great challenge. So can we then implement agility in a bureaucratic organization? And intuitively, that really sounds like the complete opposite, a complete paradox. How can we do that? But yet, we have found ways how we can actually use agility in a hierarchy, in a bureaucratic organization, by actually creating safe spaces, creating teams that don't abolish the hierarchy, but they have safe spaces to actually act in more lateral, more team-driven approaches and do not always have to abide by the hierarchy for every single decision making, as we just did with the chocolate bar, right? So lots of horrible words like fear, resistance, lack of support, old-fashioned risk aversion, right? Obviously, these are all features that many organizations have, and not only the UN. And what is important when we want to introduce agility, to think, which of these issues do we really want to address? And often the challenges that we have in our organizations are exactly the same as the opportunities, how we can use agility to actually change. So back to the slides, please. And actually to this one. So understanding the context of your organization, as I already mentioned before, is key here. And what we did in this evaluation of the pilot, we were very careful to see, what are the specific contingencies and the specific characteristics of UN organizations, of the traditional UN context, and how could Agile now fit in to address some of these boundaries and bottlenecks that we were seeing. For example, we have, and this is again not only the UN, but it's also a specific feature of the UN, to be very time zone driven in their decision-making procedures and having meetings in kind of Geneva, New York time. Often Southeast Asia is being left out a little bit. This is also happening in other organizations. But how can we actually use agility and agile ways of working to create more equality, right? To have people contribute their work pieces throughout time zones and not always kind of get up in the middle of the night to join meetings. Another big issue is rigid job descriptions, right? What are my terms of reference? How do agile methodologies allow me to actually remodel my job description, to work outside, to actually also bring in my talent as a person and to contribute to the team? So actually, first, by understanding the context and identifying the very challenges in your organization, you can also be more careful and more precise in terms of where agility can actually help you to address those challenges. For the specific context of the UN, those were like the success factors that really seemed to help at the success of agile methodology in really addressing the very specific context of the UN, which is voluntary training opportunities, a lot of cross-team learning. So usually when we do learning, we always think about the individual. We send individuals to training, we speak to individuals, but really it is a team effort, and trying to develop teams as a whole actually makes a huge difference. Develop a peer-created toolbox, right? Use and cherish those methodologies that people really want to use, that really fits their behaviors, and not try to push other things onto them. And also, obviously, embed it in the organization again, so connect it to existing projects, such as agile performance management, competency frameworks, right? Because agility cannot stand alone in an organization, right? It has to integrate, it has to actually connect to the different parts. So, although I was very negative at the beginning, actually for the pilot, there was a lot of enthusiasm, and people across the board, across hierarchical levels, were really, really enthusiastic about embracing more of this agility and finding ways to actually implement it, even in a very bureaucratic organization. Just feeling valued and empowered, working together as an enriching experience. And also the pilot was a great reminder how important it was to create these safe spaces, right? Where people could really express themselves, voice opinions, and not shy away from really contributing to the organization. That was a short excursion to the academic side on things. If you're interested more in this particular project, the evaluation of the pilot and some perspectives of the participants as well, feel free to download the report and learn more about it. With that, I'm going to hand over to Susanna, who's going to give us the private sector perspective. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Tina. Thank you. So after having heard a lot of the benefits and also the challenges of agile transformations, I'm happy to share a bit more of our insights. So I'm here today with a team, Delara, Marcus, and Alain. We all work together in the quality control organization at Hoffmann La Roche in Basel and Kaiser Augst, and have explored many aspects of agile transformation, and are happy to be able to share a few of our insights and how we applied this in practice. So why does it matter? Roche, an organization with more than 100 years of history, has a lot of challenges, as you can imagine. We before heard the term bureaucracy. I would translate this to over-engineered processes, right? As we maneuver in a fully controlled environment where we have to comply with every country's regulations where we distribute our medication, this has created an extremely complex organization with processes that differ from side to side, that differ from country to country, and with that, we're trying to serve our patients on a day-to-day basis. So the space we're maneuvering in is really cancer therapy for most of the cases, but also raw diseases, diseases in the anti-infectives environment, and just to name one, cancer being still one of the main causes for global death, particularly in middle and low income countries. This is what's holding us accountable in our feet. However, if you go to the pharmacy, the drug that you will most likely be prescribed is over 50 years old. So why is that, right? So if you or someone in your family is diagnosed with cancer, fluorouracil is one of their key medication. And while it's still on the list of essential medication of the WHO, it has strong side effects. Despite the fact that Roche has one of the best innovative pipelines of medication in the shelf, so we don't manage to bring this to our patients on a global level. And this is really frustrating. It's frustrating for us, it's frustrating for society, and it's something that we need to act on. One of the reasons being is to develop medication is a very complex process. So it takes more than 10 years to develop a single drug, and with that, more than many, many thousand setbacks in order to commercialize the drugs. Roche is following all these different steps, so from early development through clinical supply, through commercialization, and our organization, we are pleased to have the privilege to serve all these different stages as we do perform the quality control of these drugs. So here you see a little image. On the left side, you see how quality control or control of the substances has been performed more than 100 years ago, and we still do this in Basel Kaiser Augst. Now in an organization of over 100 laboratories, also spread across various sites in that region. And quality is really something that is close to our heart, not just because we're in quality control, but what you see here is our policy. So this is a policy that every employee in the pharma technical operations, so the operational part in Roche, is held accountable for. And it states that quality is in every patient's right and every employee's responsibility. So quality is a true measure of our success. And this is also reflected in our organizational structure. So the quality organization of every single facility is not reporting into the head of the facility, for instance, but has their own budgets, has their own goals, is truly kept separate as a separation of powers to be able to drive decisions. And many of these decisions can be extremely expensive for the company, so they have to be totally separated. This goes all the way down to individual rights. So I myself, I'm a deputy of the responsible person, and that means that the decisions a responsible person in Switzerland is taken has to be totally independent, and that particular person, for instance, has to be able to be at the site within 2 hours. So it goes really down to the level of individual accountability. So coming back to Agile, how to, in such a strongly regulated environment, implement new ways of working? Wouldn't that be risky? So why do we do it? I think we've shown that healthcare demands are changing, and we are not able to meet them, despite the fact that we are one of the largest pharmaceutical companies operating. The need is coming from accelerated timelines to develop new drugs. Some of you might have heard of personalized cancer medication. Super exciting, but how can we make it accessible to people that are in need? At the same time, and this is very similar to the UN, we see a change in generation, right? So how can we be future ready? How can we ensure that people operating at Roche do have the right capabilities for instance, maneuvering in a very digitalized, very automated environment? And with that, I'd be interested to hear from you, which of these elements that Agile methodology can offer to people you would be interested in, whether it's decision-making or feedback culture. I'm not surprised to see here that one of them comes up very strongly. The other is role-based working, a very exciting term we heard before. Job descriptions, they might change. Another one is vision and goal setting, right? How to align among a common goal. Let's maybe talk about decision-making, since this is the one that also comes up very strongly here. As in the UN, we are running continuous surveys to the organization. We call them geo-surveys. They are like pulse surveys. And the lack of efficiency in decision-making is always on the top 3. So how can Agile methodology help with that? The other one that we also see up here is role-based working. This is an interesting one we were going to come to. How can we improve and flexibility of working models, and that people really, based on their capabilities, can, to the best, bring their whole effectiveness to the workspace. And feedback culture, last but not least, something that we're not very strong at, but Agile methodology can help with that. And with this, coming back to the slides, I'm happy to share with you 4 case studies. So I think we can most likely skip this, maybe just 1, 2 sentences. We've seen that before in Daniela's presentation. So not surprising, yes, we've also introduced this concept about 4 years ago. And moving from the left side to the right side, as easy as it is to put on one slide, is a long, long journey. So how, from a hierarchical concept, we can go to a full self-directed Agile community. And we've did that, and Alain and Marcus here in the room, they have been product owners for a huge transformation journey that we started 3 years ago. And I'm going to show you on the next slide how it looks like. So a bit messy, but I can hope that you can grasp the concept. What you see on the left side is how we used to look before. So really 3 different sites, different senior management hierarchical structures, different various levels of organizations. And then on the right side, you see a role-based, very fluid organization. How did we came up from the left to the right? What you see is that we had to use iterative sprint cycles, and a sprint is like the little exercise we did before when we designed the chocolate bar, right? So you get a safe space, a group of people, you work through intense weeks of co-creation, gathering feedback, and then incorporating this feedback will help you to further develop what we call the minimum viable product. So a minimum viable product is a product that meets the guardrails, and these guardrails have to be very clear from the beginning onward. This is key for success. What sometimes happens is that people try to sandbox. So you kind of continuously improve the way you do work, but you don't never get to really be disruptive. And this is also a reason for many transformations to having failed, because in the end of the day, you're not really getting a different way of working. You're just basically doing the same way you did before. So by doing so, and you can see that the journey takes time, and we also heard that before, we ended up in an organization where hierarchical levels have been reduced, span of control have been increased, And now you might wonder, well, how can this work? Now that, leadership positions are changed, the roles of the leaders are changed. So the way the organization came up with a solution is that they, on a role-based model, share responsibility. So it's a team of 9 process unit leads, as we call them, and they would take, on a rotational basis, a position in the site leadership or in the quality and quality control leadership team. One of them would be responsible for strategy, another one would be responsible for safety, another one would be responsible for headcount planning. And really based also on passion and capabilities, we assign these roles. But then they will also be handed over. So it's not just the same person always has to write the minutes. They're really going through the organization. And it's quite an exciting and a new way to work. And it also takes a lot from the leader to be willing to be very open of what are their competencies and what not. On the next slide, thank you. I'm sharing the results from Dilara. So Dilara is working in one of the teams of Marcus, and she has carried out a survey with the team participants to ask how open and transparent would be to share vacation and overtime. It's a very sensible piece of data, as you can imagine, and has been in the past created tremendous overwork and unequal distribution of tasks and workload in the organization. So what we did here, and it's interesting to see, is Dilara shared the results with the organization, and more than 70% were actually willing to share their data on the daily rhythm and schedule or on their performance boards. And this, as little as a step might seem, is quite new to the organization, right? In the past, these things were truly between the manager and the individual team member. So now, with the team taking over the accountability, they themselves can assign tasks and activities flexibly across the team. So what's a prerequisite for that? You can see it's trust, it's also time commitment, and an open mindset from the team and also from the partners of that team. As you can imagine, other teams might ask, well, what are you guys doing there? Isn't that scary? Do we now also need to do that? And the team has been very successful, so they took on this data and took a decision that it's now going to be scaled up across all of quality control. So I'm really, excited to see that, and it's happening as of now as we're here. On the next slide, you can see work of Alan Stäbler. And this has been also inspired by Tina challenging myself, saying, well, Susanna, this all looks great. All the theory, all the trainings you're running through, and it seems like you're really, full trained. But how does it translate Monday to Friday? How do people in the organization really know what is expected from them, and how is their contribution to the ambition of the company? And Alain has been coming up with an awesome proposal and solution that he is experimenting and piloting in his team, which is using a gamification approach. So the team themselves, they would decide what are the key tasks over the next 3 months, put them in a visual bucket, and then they themselves would, Monday to Thursday, I think, look at it and pick the ones that they have already completed, and at the same time very easily can challenge one another by how fast they're progressing, how well did they do, and the way they're doing it is a little feedback puzzle. So they use that puzzle to also practice how to give feedback to one another, which is not so easy. And I think the key learnings you can easily see is the visualization and also the motivation effect that this drives. And last but not least, and this is to me one of the most exciting pieces here I'd like to share with you because it's very new. It's something that we just started to apply a few weeks ago, and it's a self-assessment. So teams themselves, as they start the journey to go into an agile transformation, they would rank themselves, as you did in the beginning of the time we shared together, how well they see themselves in feedback culture, taking decisions, understanding role-based working, and then from this baseline, they can then monitor the progress and really hold themselves accountable as they go through this rather, as we've also heard from Tina, stressful journey. And with that, I'd be interested to hear from you how interested and willing you would be to carry out an Agile pilot in your organization. And as we see or wait for the answers, I can share with you there has been many teams that particularly at the beginning of our journey were quite skeptical. And we left it to the teams to decide whether they want to apply the new concepts within a traditional hierarchical way of working or within a self-organized team. And interestingly, even though some of the teams, they decided to go hierarchical first, over time, by just watching the other teams experimenting and practicing and sharing their learnings, they now also come along. So it's really, I would say, critical that it's also been the team's decision how and when they want to orchestrate this journey. So I see a yes with many yeses, so that's exciting. I also see no due to operational requirements, and I think that's a really important one, right? It's important that we take our key accountables, which is peace-taking, or in our case, is really assessing and analyzing product, releasing product to the market. This is our key priority. So we're not changing what we do, we change how we do it. And I think with this, I'm happy to share with you also our learning. So here are a few impressions. Going to the challenges, think we've all seen the process is something that is one of the key challenges for us. Many changes ongoing can also defocus teams, and it's extremely important to not just keep that safe space, but also speak up as you face roadblocks, and maybe also other teams that are still in a different state of the journey to be very open with their fears. And then last but not least, your systems. In many cases, HR systems or promotion systems, they don't change at the same pace. So how can you make sure that also in these very sensible situations, you still keep moving with your journey? And then last but not least, I think we also touched that it's really a change that starts with yourself. So it's nothing that you can implement top-down or just in few pockets or just as a team. It really has to be something that starts at the individual. And with that, a little roadmap proposal that Dilara put together. So how can you go about such a journey? What could be steps along your way? I think we talked about a common mission or a common purpose. I think that's be really clear of why do you do it? What's your learning platform and what's the problem that you like to address? Set goals and ways to measure your progress. Be really clear that failure is a key part in that journey. So failure is the ultimate way to learn. And the integration of both the employees and also your stakeholders, your customers, your senior management, that is critical as you promote transparency and then thereby really can also share learnings and reflections with one another. So to keep in mind, things first get worse before they get better. And this journey this phase is critical. So as you face the conflicts that will arise, the uncertainty that will also have an impact on your performance in the beginning, how well are you equipped to face these challenges and how everybody in the organization can help you along? Transparency about that and be able to really transition from a failure into a learning culture. And last but not least, have a little fun. This is great. Every time we went to the sprint phase, this is really a flow feeling, right? So you feel very connected with everybody. You feel heard. You feel valued. And I think that is really what's been carrying you along. And that also has to persist as you face day-to-day challenges. So to spend this time, to be patient with one another, to have empathy with everybody, also with your own boss, who might have a totally different mindset than you yourself have, right? That's something that, to me, is most inspirational and really the key of what makes Agile ways of working so important for a particularly large and very historical organizations as we inspire others to follow that journey. And why it matters to me, it's our patients don't have time to wait, and so don't have people in the world, right? They're looking at us, they're looking at our organizations like we are. And I think this is really something that we can take in our hands. And when I share with you the medication that you saw before, I have someone very close to my heart who was prescribed fluorouracil, and despite the fact that I know what great products we have in the pipeline, he at some point decided not to continue the treatment because of the side effects. And yeah, unfortunately, he's no longer with us, and I think this is something that is not acceptable for no one. So thanks a lot for having me, and I'm looking forward to our discussion and your questions.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. As a very last word, I think it doesn't work now, I have no idea.
Take this one.
I hope this kind of discussion here has demonstrated how we actually work across sectors and how we exchange ideas across sectors. And although we work in very different settings, our organizations, our approaches are sometimes very different, I think there's a great experience to learn from each other. There's a lot we can actually bring out of this learning. So we thought about how we make this inclusive experience and also kind of offer this to you and your organizations and your teams. So we put together a cross-sectoral briefing on how to implement modern agile concepts. I'm not being heard? Oh my God. Can I say it again? Yes? Okay. Last slide. What I was just saying, and sorry for the mic problems, I didn't press the button well enough, so that's also a skill I have to learn. This still doesn't work, I think. I'm going to say it a third time. Third time, last slide. Fantastic. Third time, last slide. So what I was saying is that I hope you've seen from this panel here today that we come from very different organizations, very different approaches, but the collaboration and the learning from each other has been amazing. And although our organizations and approaches differ widely, there is a lot of common ground and a common kind of reflections that we could actually bring out of this experience, and that would also like to share with you, and to include people in the audience, your organizations, your teams. We offer briefings on how to implement modern Agile concepts. So this is not an Agile training, but this is actually a practical guide to help organizations think about the piloting and the scaling of Agile in their organizations. So this is something we can offer to actually pass on our knowledge, because ultimately what we want to do is to work across sectors and to make these cross-sector learnings tangible, because often it remains at the rhetorical level where we just kind of get together and we do a nice panel, but then nothing really happens. And for us, it's very important that things really change, that our learnings are being passed on. So we are very much looking forward to hearing back from many of you who'd like to be included in discussion. And this is the last word from my side. I'm going to hand it over to Thomas. Thank you so much, everybody, for hearing that 3 times, and for those online, only once. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody. Just a few things that I picked up before we move into the final Q&A session. Also the private sector, I think there's one myth that the private sector is profit-oriented, profit-driven, and we in the UN are value-driven. It's not that clear-cut. You also have a very much of a value-driven aspect as well that you mentioned also, that the Agile methodology helps you in delivering and developing better medication afterwards for your clients. So it's actually the end result that you have already in mind. Not that we in the UN are not looking at that, but through introducing Agile, we also want to be better performing and eventually better serve our clients and better deliver on our mandates. Also, the dark side of Agile we heard as well. We don't want to sugarcoat it. It rocks the boat. It creates tension. It asks questions about what hierarchy is actually justified and legitimate, and how much can it actually be reduced to a level that fits, and it may be different variations depending on the organizations and context. Also, psychological safety is one key element of Agile for it to work. Also, Daniela and Malta mentioned that it doesn't really matter what team it is. You know, the 4 pilot teams, one was a very rigid team that benefited as much, maybe even more than the others from these tools and from the mindset. And actually they realized they already are pretty much agile, which is also an experience of many. It's not that we all start from scratch. Actually, when you talk about it, you find out that actually a lot of practices are already there. And also we heard that from Malta that, you know, we should also look at the teams, because there's always a social aspect to it. It's not an individual thing. Team coaching, we have some professional coaches here as well in the audience. I think team coaching is really on the rise. You know, we use that a lot more for that purpose as well. So now we go into the final round, and also I want to give you the number again, 99393278, menti.com, for those that haven't logged in yet. Ask your questions, but I would like to start maybe to take the first 3 questions from the floor here. So to give you connected from the outside time to post your questions. And maybe if you can take 3 in a row, and then we will see with the panelists that would be most appropriate to answer. So who would like to start first? Yes, Alexander, over there.
So thank you very much for this very informative session, and very impressed to hear about the different angles that were discussed, both from UNIGE side, from the university side, from the private sector side. Plus, it's just overall nice to be again in a room after so long listening to an event, so there's also this plus. I just wanted to ask, what do you think, like for staff from UNIGE, like what can staff do to maybe promote this kind of agile movement? Also maybe from like any hiring manager perspectives, like if you could list maybe the top 3 things people can do from their side to help this, this kind of mentality and take it forward. Thank you.
Or maybe if it's okay with you, we can maybe start with that question straight away. So what can individuals do to pursue this further? How can they become proactive? Daniela, maybe would you like to start?
So in the UN, you know, we are right now starting to roll out, and we very much start with the mindset, the agile mindset. It always starts with the culture and with the mindset. So what staff can do is simply, you know, go to the briefings, try to learn more about it. Let us know that you're interested. Talk in your teams. Say in your teams that we really would like to learn more about, because there will be more and more opportunities for training, and teams can voluntarily come forward. So it's really the individuals, the more that everybody is interested and asks questions about it and, you know, promotes the word, the more we get like impetus that we can roll it out further. So it's really starts with the interest and learn about the mindset and see how this can be applied in your team.
For us in our research, we saw that a lot of the innovative and ideas and sometimes new approaches get a little bogged down at the senior middle management level. And I think at that level, just specifically at that level, staff, what can they do is they really lead through example. So I think showing as a team leader, and we mentioned this in the talk as well, that it is not bad to go out and go to one of these trainings and to show that you don't know something and to say, well, I'm going to learn something new. I don't need to constantly be the one who knows everything. I think just leading through that example is already huge.
Yeah, maybe to complement that. Am I being heard? Well, to complement that, I think on an individual level, I think it's kind of finding a clear starting point. So often starting small, I think, is the key to say, well, this is my one area, my one tool that I want to implement is better than kind of starting with a huge initiative. Being self-reflective and also allowing to kind of criticism of oneself. I think that's very important to really immerse yourself as an individual, because that can also sometimes be hard and painful, but it's a learning process. And the third one really is kind of being also inclusive, right? So doing it with a team, including colleagues, briefing everybody, making sure everybody's aware what the journey is, right? Because I think if people are not aware, they often feel pressured, not ready. So inclusiveness, I think, is very important.
Maybe something that we did at a very practical base is when I started with the team and I was new to the organization, there was also the challenge, well, how do we get to know one another? And instead of doing a team building, we actually all together went through their coaching training, what we call the self-organized team support. So we trained ourselves to become coaches, and then thereafter took the decision whether we want to apply that learning at the own team or offer it to another team within the organization. And as you follow this learn, do, teach approach, as we call it, the learning experience for us was really key. I still don't know whether it was better than a team building. We did this thereafter. But this has brought us together in a much different way. And I would say really also helped us, as Tina said, to get to know one another's strengths and also one another's learning opportunities, right? Because as you do that, as a leader, you really have to start with yourself first. So what are your strengths? Where are you struggling? And how open are you about that with your team? That, I think, to me is critical.
Thank you. Before I see you, maybe just 1 second, I don't forget you, but there's one question from Menti as well I would like to ask the panelists as well. Are there projections on how much Agile will be mainstreamed in the UN? Mainstreaming in the UN? Scaling? When do we see this happen realistically? Daniela again?
This is a very good question because, as we know, in the UN, we can't ever give a real time frame, especially not with something like this, where we are actually going out and we're saying voluntarily who wants to, learn more about Agile with the team. So we've started here in Geneva with 4 teams. Now we're adding one global one from UNEP. We are having conversations with the department that's DGC, that's the resident coordinator offices, because the resident coordinator office also came and wanted to be Agile. So it's really, we're spreading the word, and we are waiting for teams to come forward and say we want to learn more, and we're always starting with the mindset. Now we're also thinking about developing an online course about the mindset, because that's a piece that you can do like in a bigger group also, and with this hopefully we can scale more faster. But when do we see this happening realistically? Well, realistically, it starts to grow. It's also going to grow in Bangkok. It is growing in New York. So the more people that join New Work and help us roll out the Agile, the faster it will be. But it's very difficult, basically impossible to give a realistic time frame. And mainstream, well, that's also difficult to say, unfortunately.
I think I would ask the question a different way. I think the question is asked in the wrong way, because mainstream very much relies on people from the top pushing things downward, and this is not how it works, right? So I think it depends on all of you, on all the staff members there to say, well, I actually want to implement it, I want to start with my teams, I want to push this, right? So only if this will come from all directions, I think it will once be mainstreamed. But maybe that's also an experience that you had similarly, right?
Yeah, I was just reflecting on the question. I think it goes all dimensions. So what we've been seeing is that the teams really bottom up. They are calling, they're asking for it. And it's more the leadership team, which now, they don't come last, but they kind of, as they're observing how much momentum this has created, they're like, oh my God, yeah, now we have to go further. So they now came up with the self-assessment. So again, giving something to the organization which is new and is also exposing them. So this is quite exciting. I'm tempted to give the question to the team, what they think. So what did you do different, Marcus or Alain? So I need a mic maybe. What would you propose to do for teams that are interested in starting this journey?
So for our team, it was not so easy to take over the responsibilities. We had one day, okay, the 1st of April, we will start with a new Agile team, and then not everybody was ready for that. Yeah. Okay, now it's not the boss here, he will take over responsibilities, he will decide, and that was one thing that I think we need time to improve the team and they are ready to take over these responsibilities. And I think that was one point. That was our learning in our team.
Thank you very much. Oh, you want to add very quickly?
Only a quick add, and we are still on it. So it's really a learning path you're starting, and we're still with some upcoming tasks. We are doing the same iteration again and again.
Could I say something quickly?
Yes, please.
Well, I think it's interesting that we're using the words agile and mainstream, and we're here in the UN. I think it's really interesting to see a lot of these tech words being used. And when I was reflecting also on the way the question was phrased, it made me think about the Gartner's cycle of adoption of new technology. So as we adopt Agile here, always at the beginning, there's this excitement. You know, we're probably in that right now at the UN with Agile. It'll come up, more people start using it, and then we'll have this trial of disillusionment, right? So I think that's really important to note, is that perhaps before we mainstream, there will be that slight dip of disillusionment, and you both noted that in your presentations, things will get worse before they get better. So perhaps before it gets mainstream, the UN will have to go over that and really get through that.
Thank you, Katherine. And there's also a dark side of my role as a moderator, which is the role of the timekeeper. We are unfortunately slowly running at the end of the time. We will still take your question, but I also want to encourage you and also let you know that we have a coffee break afterwards. We will be able to continue the discussion. We will be staying here as well. For those that are outside, you know, contact us, continue the discussion. But we just take the last question from the floor.
Thanks, Thomas. I got the mic.
Okay, then we take two, because the gentleman was also there first.
Question.
But go ahead.
All right. Elizabeth Nash, Coach for Equality. So there's a lot of work to be done in softening hierarchies and changing leadership habits. And so I'm wondering what organizations can do to harness that kind of natural tendency of young professionals, of the younger generation, to reshape structures, to push for inclusion, especially in decision-making.
Thank you, Lise. But then the gentleman before, because I promised you the floor, so we take that question as well, and then maybe you can answer to those, and maybe any final comment you would like to, something that you could not mention today that you would still like to get across, that's also an opportunity.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I'm Alexander Herjazi from University of Geneva. Thank you very much for an insightful discussion. Some of the elements of this discussion remind me of what has been extensively discussed this week at the UN here, from the mayor and city management who've been dealing with a lot of emergency-based decision-making since COVID. And one element that has come out of these discussions is resilience building. How do you see agile action, agility, built in the long-term resilience building, also taking into stock the importance of feedback loops and citizens not to be left behind?
Thank you. So two questions. First was the young generation. Over to you. Who would like to start?
I can start. I would say it's going both ways, right? The young generation, they have a typical or often a tendency to be very naturally more agile than older parts of the organization. However, I would not say it's a matter of age. We have people that are extremely experienced, and they're asking for these new ways to work because decision-making, and this is what leads me to the second question, at the core has never been a top-down if it was a good decision. If it's a good decision, you are, and we have this role of the responsible person, for instance, you are in a room with functions and experts, and by actively listening to all these different opinions and perspectives, this is when the best decisions have been taken. So at the core, even this process, which to us is one of the most critical, is very agile. But how do we scale it, and how do we make this now a concept that is applied in every situation, including different parts of the organization, no matter of age, no matter of nationality, no matter where they come from, is, I think, something where the Agile methodology can help us. And decision-making is becoming faster when doing so. I'm resistant to keep this to a certain generation. I think everybody is contributing. Some team members, of course, they are, let's say, what we call digital natives, so they absolutely help us with dealing with ambiguity when new computer systems, for instance, are implemented. But you also need their experience and the value-driven, knowledgeable population of the organization to really make it sustainable. So it's not a matter of one population only. I think we cross-pollinate one another.
I very much agree with this, what Susanna just said. And it's also just going back to the point that it's about the function, not about level. And function also is not really related to age. So what we want to achieve is that nobody is like put somewhere because of their certain place in the hierarchy. It's really, no, it's you have a function, you have a product, something to deliver, and that's your place in a project team. And there, people will naturally learn from each other, just like Susanna said. And the younger generations, they do help us already. We see this. Look at the great team here in the Knowledge Commons, for example, you know, using the new technology. So teams will learn from each other that way, and that will also consolidate their place in a project team. But it's really, we need to get people out of the rigid structure that they're sometimes in and allow them to work across, delivering something that they all agree. And then these things follow naturally. And again, that's why we first focus on the mindset piece.
Quick, sorry. So just to this question, I think really, I agree with everything that has been said. Maybe just a short thing on, you know, there are in every organization, there need to be these guardrails, there need to be some hierarchies for accountability, for very delicate processes. We had quality control, we had peacekeeping, and so on, where we can't abolish hierarchies, right? But I think between that, there's a lot of space where really hierarchies are just, you know, not needed that much, and where in reality, we can really work across them and take a much leaner approach. And maybe to Alexander's question, I think agility should be the means, resilience the end. But the trouble is, if we're still in this piloting phase, I think there is this danger that the organization will step back to the non-agile ways of working, where it would really need agile ways in crisis situations, right? So unless we have kind of fully embraced agility in the processes and feel comfortable with it as an organization, we won't achieve this resilience to the same extent, right? So I think this is the real trap that we have here, that as long as it's not fully embraced, we won't achieve this real resilience that organizations need. And I think this is also what is happening in many organizations now during the crisis, during the COVID crisis, that we suddenly see a swing back to very hierarchical ways of decision making because we're not able to embrace it fully.
Just to build on that, I agree with everything that was said in the first question, and I think building on Tina's response to the second question, I think there's another methodology that can help with this resilience that goes very closely hand in hand to Agile, and that's human-centered design. And that goes along with this, you know, the emergency response, putting the civilians at the table as well. I mean, when you bring people from the field, when you bring people who are actually engaging the beneficiaries, engaging with the problems that you're trying to solve, that's where you can use Agile decision-making methodologies plus the human-centered design to really build this resilience that is, as Tina mentioned, the end goal.
Thank you very much. We slightly ran over time. Apologies, Natalie. Apologies, just a few minutes. I would like to thank the panel, all of you here in the LER. It's so nice to be back in plenary with you, and also colleagues that were connected. Maybe one last word about modern Agile, the Agile Manifesto. We didn't touch too much upon that. For those that like to catch up, I think the report that Tina put up earlier explains it all. So for those, and it's also.
We actually have time for one more question from Mentimeter, Thomas. If
you have more questions, more
time.
Yeah,
let's take one more. Yeah.
Very good. So, but you can read that up as well. In that report. In the evaluation of the pilot. So it's all explained because we didn't cover it explicitly today. So there's another question. Would it be possible to show some concrete and precise practical steps to implement Agile methodologies in our multicultural environment? Thank you very much. Concrete, precise, practical steps to implement Agile methodologies. Very quick, precise, to the point. Daniela.
So again, first, practical is everybody take the mindset piece first to understand that it starts with me and what I believe, the way I work with the team. This already changes a lot how teams work together. And then there's practical things like the huddles technique. You do quick meeting techniques with your team. This is something you can easily learn. And then there's all the other very technical, but I'd like to hear Susanna's input on that one because Roche is a multicultural environment as well. And is there one precise practical thing that you would take out of the methodology and say this one in particular?
So the way we've cut this down, building on what you just said, is 5 principles. The first starting with psychological safety. The second is conflict resolution. The third is decision making. Then comes vision and goals, and then feedback culture. And basically, while we applied this in the European and in the US context, there's multiple versions and flavors of this across also our Asia-Pacific colleagues and colleagues in Rio, for instance, and helped us tremendously. So by going through all these cycles, we have made sure that it applies to all cultures and that it applies within the multicultural context that we maneuver in.
Maybe from your perspective?
Well, we were just observers, so we were not implementing Agile in the uni yet, unfortunately. But I think the huddles is a great, very easy, practical way to implement directly. You have these morning meetings, you get together, you instantly get to get feedback from your team and to assign the tasks for the day. To have more broader weekly meetings, larger huddles is also very important to iterate on what happened during that week. Is something not going well? Do we need more time? And of course, the boards to move along. You know, it's very practical, very easy. Move your project along as you complete certain tasks. So, I think on our side, just final note, we're very grateful to have been brought in on this pilot as the observers, and it's been a wonderful experience to do this.
Thank you. The pleasure was all ours. Maybe one last tip from my side, being a bit of an older manager, maybe belonging to the command and control time, you know, when that's how I was socialized when I was younger. It's not a matter of age, I was glad to hear, but also for those who would like to see more agile and more of an agile mindset, but maybe also more agile methodologies, techniques and tools practiced. Talk to us as well. You engage in a discussion with your supervisor who may not know about these concepts, and we have a lot of material people as well that could come and also share their experiences with you, maybe to get the discussion and the dialogue started. You know, because many middle managers, we didn't get a chance to talk about it, they're also sandwiched, they're under a lot of pressure. They would like to do it, but there is a risk aversion in the organization. There's also, you're being punished. You know, if you take too many risks, that's also part of the truth. So how can you actually be more agile and more innovative in the organization is sometimes easier said than done. But we have a lot of experience, but also materials, you know, to help you on that. And that is, again, maybe we can close with that. All of us, also Susanna from the private sector, and also, of course, our colleagues from the University of Geneva and us are happy here, and available for you as well if you want to kickstart something in your context. So thank you very much again to everybody, and I hand over to Nathalie for the closing of the session today.
Thank you so much, Thomas, and some great last words from Thomas. We did have a few more questions on Menti, as well as a few hands I saw raised in the room. So if you are in the room, we do have coffee available after the session. Please come speak to our speakers. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. If your question did not get answered on Menti and you would like an answer, please email us, commons@un.org. We'll put that in the WebEx chat, and we'll make sure to pass those questions on to the speakers. Hopefully, they'll be happy to respond. A big thanks to Thomas and our speakers. A huge thanks to you for being here and taking your time to learn with us. We hope it was useful, and we hope to see you soon again at the Commons. We'll make sure to send to you the subscription form if you'd like to find out what's happening every month, as well as a feedback. We'd love to know what you'd like to see improved or other questions that you'd like to see covered at the Commons. That's it from us, and we hope you take care and hope to see you soon. Bye for now.